Every city in the world has a local flavor. A flavor that comes from the signature dishes of the town, from a group of preferred ingredients, or a type of restaurant that is only found in that area. It is a flavor that comes from appreciating a particular piece of cooking equipment or a technique. There are dozens of influences, but the local flavor is always the result of the history, geography, economics, and the ethnic groups that have settled in the city. This is San Francisco, and the history of its growth is unique. Almost every other major city in America was founded by a group of people with similar ideas, similar traditions, and a similar desire to build a new community. Puritans in Boston, Mormons in Salt Lake City, Catholics in New Orleans. The one great exception is San Francisco, and it's amazing to see how this difference has affected the way this city eats and drinks. So please join me, BURT WOLF, for a taste of the local flavors of San Francisco. San Francisco was founded by 25,000 guys who showed up one afternoon in 1849 to find gold. They were not interested in agriculture or craft work or building a community. They were interested in getting as rich as they could, as fast as they could. And as soon as they got rich, they were interested in partying. Some of those guys got rich from finding gold and later on finding silver. But many of them got rich from selling things to the miners, like Levi Strauss, who sold them jeans, or Leland Stanford, who sold them so many groceries that he was able to put up the money for Stanford University. But the gastronomic history of San Francisco is not just about money. The people who came here during the gold rush came from every part of the world, and they held on to many of their gastronomic traditions. French sailors who were on their way to Asia came into San Francisco and jumped ship to head for the gold fields. If they struck it rich, they came back to town to live it up, to eat and drink the best of everything. If they didn't strike it rich, they came back to town to open a restaurant. The French and many other European immigrants influenced the early cooking of San Francisco. But the biggest impact came from the thousands of Chinese laborers who worked in the gold fields and on the railroads and at the wineries. They built their own town within a town. Today it is the largest Chinatown outside Asia. Originally, it was almost completely a male society. The men lived in small rooms without kitchens. All their meals were taken in nearby restaurants, hundreds of restaurants, and at all levels of quality and expense. Today, some of the finest Chinese cooking in the world is right here in San Francisco.
Good morning, America.
Good morning.
Shirley Fong Torres is known as the Wok Whiz. She is a cookbook author, historian, and television chef who has created a walking tour of her neighborhood that she calls "I Can't Believe I Ate My Way Through Chinatown." She also runs daily tours that cover the history, culture, and folklore of the community.
So our first stop will be to Samuel Restaurant for a Chinese breakfast. This is churong fun. Churong in Cantonese means long, and fun means the rice noodle. This is cold, and inside is lean barbecue pork that they make here, and then there's coriander and green onions and some scrambled eggs. So it's sort of like a breakfast roll. And so you just pick it up with your either your fingers or your chopsticks as a little snack. One of my favorite produce markets is right there in the corner. Just try this. This is called dao miu. I hope you ordered this in the restaurant. We do this because we just want you to taste it. It's a pea sprout, comes from the snow pea family, and when you bite into it, you will see there's a little bit of an aftertaste. Now, that's a lion dance to signify the grand opening of a new restaurant or a business. So there's a lot of celebration. So to find a nice, good duck, we look for one that's caramelized, that has not too fat, like that one has a little bit too much fat on it, but not too skinny because then there won't be enough meat. You want one to have a graceful neck and nice legs and thighs. What kind of body I'm trying for? Oh, back to the duck. Now, which one do you rethink?
We're going to go with the N one.
The N one. Okay, we'll pick that one.
That was your pick. So
that was my pick. lunch. And I love this place because they have excellent dim sum and then also great entrees. And the food we're having today is actually more like a banquet because we have been eating so much on the street already. And the Chinese realized there was a business here. They could open up a restaurant and these non-Chinese would come in and pay money for their meals, and so Chinese food started to become popular.
At the same time the Chinese were building Chinatown, the Italians were building San Francisco's Little Italy. It was originally settled by Italian sailors from northern Italy who jumped ship to join the gold rush. When the rush was over, they stayed on as farmers, shopkeepers, and restaurateurs, putting their community together in an area known as North Beach. The North Beach restaurant is a good example of a place that serves the traditional dishes of northern Italy. Bruno Orsi is in the kitchen, and his partner Lorenzo Petroni is up front. They're both from Tuscany. I've known Lorenzo for years, so I felt I could borrow part of his kitchen to show you how to make pasta at home and to make some for our lunch. So, you make the pasta dough, take a ball about the size of a lemon, and then you need a pasta machine to make it home. The first job of the pasta machine is to thin this out into a flat ribbon. And it will have something that is made from stainless steel or some non-reactive system. You want the machine to be sturdy. It's very important that it have a great lock that will hold it down, a clamp that will hold it on the board. If you're going to do it by hand, you want to make sure that this mounts in a way that it's secure so it won't slide out. You take your bowl of pasta and you put it into the rollers that will thin it out. Grazie. Now, you can do this by hand, the grinding, and it works pretty well. Notice it keeps getting longer each time I do this. And I flour it between each pass, but you can also do it with a motor. It makes it a little easier. It's not a big deal. All right, watch this. Now, normally, you would let this dry for a couple of hours. And then when it was dry, you would change to the cutters. When you pick out a machine, it's nice to have at least 2 cutters. This one has, I think, 6 different cutters. Okay, andiamo. That's it. And that's how easy it is to make pasta at home. The Italians were the first major European immigrants, and the Chinese were the first major Asian immigrants. The second Asian group to immigrate to San Francisco came in the early years of the 20th century, and they came from Japan. Over 25,000 Japanese arrived in California, and many headed straight for San Francisco. Today there are over 12,000 Japanese Americans in San Francisco, and they make major contributions to the city's business, cultural, and gastronomic communities. The word around town is that when it comes to Japanese food, Ebisu is at the top of the list. It's owned by Steve Fuji, a major authority on sushi, who taught classes on sushi preparation and presentation at San Francisco's De Young Museum. I brought along my own gear to make sure that I would be able to do this at home. First thing I brought was a rice cooker. They're wonderful because they will do it automatically and the rice will come out perfectly every time. When you're picking one out, make sure that it has a non-stick surface on the inside so the rice will come away easily. You also want one that has markings in there so you know just how much water to put in. It'll cook white rice in about 30 minutes, about 40 or 45 minutes for brown rice. It has a clear top so you can see when the rice is finished. And when it is finished, it automatically shifts to a holding temperature and it will keep the rice warm for up to 12 hours. Good piece of gear. Second thing is my sushi kit. Okay, Steve, do I have the right stuff here?
Okay,
Sushi vinegar.
Sushi vinegar, yes.
All right.
And soy sauce.
Sauce, rice vinegar,
right?
pickled ginger,
And wasabi.
wasabi, special rice,
Special rice.
my nori,
Yeah.
dried seaweed,
Okay.
and the single most important piece of equipment, a teeny little window shade.
There you go. Yeah,
Okay.
that works.
Okay, I'm ready to learn how to make sushi.
Okay. Then you put seaweed on a bamboo shade, and like so. This is the shiny part.
Right.
It's outside, and the dull sides go inside.
So it's the dull side that goes up?
Right.
Gotcha.
And then you put rice. It's leave about ½ inch or so from the top, and they go like so. And then you just bring it down easy, like so.
I'm just spreading it out.
Right. So
This is spreading out better than mine. Going to be in remedial sushi making, I can tell.
and then come to the end, put wasabi, and like so. It's Japanese green horseradish.
Green horseradish, okay.
Okay, put this in the middle.
Okay.
So bring this mat like so, and then bring it over. And then when you lift this one up, it's got almost ½ inch lips over here.
Right.
And then pick up the mat, one side, okay, and then push it over. Just roll. Not too hard. Okay, and then like this. There you go.
I do that?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Give me a match.
Okay, wait a knife
Okay.
and run the water down so will not stick to the rice. That's why a lot of people do go like this and there you go.
To run the water down, okay.
You're right-handed, I'm left-handed, so
Okay.
then you cut them in half.
Cut it in half.
Is that a half? I don't think so.
Well, okay.
Okay, turn this over.
Turn that over.
Should be even, right?
No. I'll make it even. Wait a second. Okay.
Okay,
Now it's even.
cut this in a 3-piece.
Into 3 pieces.
Right. Then when you put them in a dish, should be height will be all same, and the fish in the middle.
So the first thing I noticed is they're not all the same height, and my fish is not in the middle as effectively as yours.
Right.
Okay.
But as it goes, you will learn.
Starting in the early 70s, restaurants in and around San Francisco started developing a style of cooking that became known as California cuisine. They began to use local products produced to the restaurant's specifications. A perfect example is Hawthorne Lane. Ann Gingrass is the chef, and David Gingrass manages the house. The room is beautiful, sophisticated, and comfortable. The open kitchen can be seen but not heard, and the food, which blends European, Asian, and American elements, is excellent. We started with a carpaccio of apple with walnuts and jack cheese, which Ann is going to demonstrate. But first, a word about slicing. Normally when you cut food, the food stays still and the blade moves over it. But there's an alternative where the blade stays stationary and the food moves over the blade. And the best example of that is something called the mandolin. This is a particularly good one. It's made out of a fiberglass form. The blades lock in place. You can use this nut on the back to adjust the thickness, both in inches and in millimeters. And there are a number of different types of blades. Take your food, put it in place above the blade, take your safety guide and lock it on. It holds the food, and then you're in business. Our apples are ready. Let's go. What happens next?
Then we put the apples on the plate. So we coat the plate like this, and then to prevent it from turning discoloring, we brush it with a little walnut oil mixed with parsley and tarragon. Then I sprinkle it with this little walnuts chopped with these chocolate nibs.
Yeah.
They're like the chocolate bean crushed up. And then we squeeze a little lemon juice, salt and pepper, and then we shave this cheese. And you just sprinkle that around.
That's it.
Well,
I'm ready to start.
Yeah.
The apple carpaccio was the first appetizer. Next, crispy fried prawns with toasted garlic sauce and fresh spring rolls. A taste of stir-fried lamb with eggplant and garlic chips served in radicchio leaf cups. The main course was spiced marinated grilled chicken with curried noodles and carrot and peanut wontons. And for dessert, a lemon chiffon passion fruit cake with shaved white chocolate. At the end of this program, I'll show you how to get the recipes for the dishes in this show. Since the days when the miners came into San Francisco with their pockets filled with gold, the restaurateurs of this city have made it their business to supply their customers with the best of everything. In 1952, the Buena Vista Cafe decided to try and reproduce the perfect Irish coffee as it was made in the Shannon Airport in Shannon, Ireland. It wasn't easy. They even went back to Shannon to try and figure out what they were doing wrong. And they didn't get it right until the mayor of San Francisco, who once owned a dairy, figured out that they had to let the cream rest for 48 hours before they whipped it to the ideal consistency. At last, the perfect Irish coffee had been recreated in the United States. There was much rejoicing throughout the land, and many people lived happily ever after. And here's how they did it. First, a heat-proof glass is selected and preheated with hot water. 2 sugar cubes go in. Then the glass is filled to the 3/4 mark with hot coffee, and the sugar is dissolved. A jigger of Irish whiskey is stirred in. Now, they only put the whiskey in because it helps hold up the lightly whipped cream, which is poured in gently over a spoon. Not even the Blarney Stone was left unturned in their search for the perfect Irish coffee. Here is to the pursuit of excellence. In 1849, the Bodine family arrived in San Francisco and opened a French bakery. They used French baking techniques, but incorporated a sourdough process to create a sourdough French bread. Since then, San Francisco has become famous for its sourdough bread, which is made from a combination of flour, water, and wild yeast.
That's the mother dough that we've perpetuated since 1849.
My guide is Larry Strain, the president of the company. The flour and water are mixed together and exposed to the air in order to attract the wild yeast. Once the yeast takes hold, the mass turns into a starter or culture, which is the foundation of sourdough bread, and acts as a leavening agent like any yeast or baking soda. Each time a new batch of bread is baked, some of the original starter is incorporated in the new batter, and some of the new batter is turned back into the original starter. The Bodine Bakery is still using the starter that got started in 1849. What makes sourdough bread taste different in one part of the world than it does in another is the local wild yeast that grows in the area. The wild yeast in San Francisco is so specialized that it is known as Lactobacillus San Francisco. Now, of course, you could buy sourdough starter in San Francisco and bring it home to any city in the world and make sourdough bread, but it would never taste the same as it does in San Francisco because your local wild yeast would want to join in the fun. San Franciscans have an extraordinary interest in good eating and drinking. They take it seriously in terms of pleasure, but they also take it seriously in terms of business. There are over 3,500 restaurants in San Francisco. You could eat in a different one every day, and it will take you 11 years to get through them. And travelers love that. San Francisco is the #1 tourist destination and considered to be the top city for restaurants. 16 million visitors come here every year and spend $6.5 billion. In 1909, the city formed the San Francisco Convention and Visitors Bureau, which makes it one of the oldest organizations of its kind in the United States. It has over 2,300 member firms, which makes sense because tourism is the largest business in San Francisco. Over the years, the Bureau came to realize that many people traveled because of their interest in eating and drinking, and they commissioned the first national study of people who loved good food and wine, which has become known as the Foodie Study. John Marks is the president of the San Francisco Convention and Visitors Bureau.
A foodie is a dining enthusiast, a hobbyist, if you will. Some of us play golf, some play tennis, some go boating. Foodies clearly like to go out and dine and enjoy fine wine, and they do so in record numbers. About 77 million Americans self-classify themselves as foodies. Well, foodies today are really kind of going back to basics, looking for good value, good food, good quality, good service. They're over the minimalist thing, they're over the tall food thing, and they're just looking for an exceptional evening out. Well, San Francisco has the very high-end restaurants that people know about, but it's that large base, that 3,500, that we're so strong in, and the ethnic diversity of our restaurants is terrific.
One of the major pieces of information to come out of the foodie study was the importance of the credit card, which was music to the ears of San Francisco's business community because San Francisco is the home of the modern credit card. The idea of using a credit card to make a purchase was introduced during the early decades of the 20th century. A major catalyst was the automobile. As Americans bought more and more cars, they used more and more gas, and the gas companies got the idea of issuing a credit card so you could fill up your tank and debit your bank at the same time. The card only worked for the gas company that issued it, which kept you loyal, but Americans, being somewhat promiscuous, usually carried at least two. In 1914, Western Union offered a credit card for its services, and then a number of large retailers joined in. But they were all closed systems. You could only use the card for purchases in the company that offered you the card. Most people still found it pretty tough to make a purchase without cash. But the real breakthrough in the credit card business was made by a company that got started at the beginning of this century in San Francisco. A.P. Giannini was the head of a small neighborhood bank called the Bank of Italy. He became famous because the day after the great earthquake of 1906, he crawled through the rubble of his bank, took out the money that was in a safe, set up a table in the street, and began making loans to people who wanted to rebuild their homes and businesses. His little bank grew and eventually changed its name to the Bank of America. Giannini's interest in extending credit eventually ended up as the Visa card. And in spite of the fact that it can be used to purchase anything, anywhere, its users seem to have a special interest in good food and wine, which is typical of most things that originate in San Francisco. An example is Beach Blanket Babylon. Beach Blanket Babylon is a musical spoof of pop culture that opened in 1974 and has been running ever since, which makes it the longest-running musical revue in the history of American theater. And some of its funniest stuff is about eating and drinking.
Or maybe stuffing into food, oh boy. My thighs are running, and then I got a problem because I'm into food. San Francisco, open your golden gates, you let the stranger away.
That's a brief taste of the local flavors of San Francisco. I hope it whetted your appetite for a visit. And I hope you will visit with me next time on Local Flavors. I'm BURT WOLF.
You can watch this program and link to hundreds of other BURT WOLF programs free at burtwolf.com. There's information on how to tour the same places, plus Burt's slightly irreverent take on history and culture. It's all at burtwolf.com.
Shirley Fong Torres is known as the Wok Whiz. She is a cookbook author, historian, and television chef who has created a walking tour of her neighborhood that she calls I Can't Believe I Ate My Way Through Chinatown. She also runs daily tours that cover the history, culture, and folklore of the community.
So our first stop will be to Samuel Restaurant for a Chinese breakfast. This is churong fun. Churong in Chinese, in Cantonese means long, and fun means the rice noodle. This is cold, and inside is lean barbecue pork that they make here, and then there's coriander and green onions and some scrambled eggs. So it's sort of like a breakfast roll. And so you just pick it up with your either your fingers or your chopsticks as a little snack.
Every city in the world has a local flavor. A flavor that comes from the signature dishes of the town, from a group of preferred ingredients, or a type of restaurant that is only found in that area. It is a flavor that comes from appreciating a particular piece of cooking equipment or a technique. There are dozens of influences, but the local flavor is always the result of the history, geography, economics, and the ethnic groups that have settled in the city. This is San Francisco, and the history of its growth is unique. Almost every other major city in America was founded by a group of people with similar ideas, similar traditions, and a similar desire to build a new community. Finding gold and later on finding silver. But many of them got rich from selling things to the miners, like Levi Strauss, who sold them jeans, or Leland Stanford, who sold them so many groceries that he was able to put up the money for Stanford University. But the gastronomic history of San Francisco is not just about money. The people who came here during the gold rush came from every part of the world, and they held on to many of their gastronomic traditions. French sailors who were on their way to Asia came into San Francisco and jumped ship to head for the gold fields. If they struck it rich, they came back to town to live it up, to eat and drink the best of everything. If they didn't strike it rich, Puritans in Boston, Mormons in Salt Lake City, Catholics in New Orleans. The one great exception is San Francisco, and it's amazing to see how this difference has affected the way this city eats and drinks. So please join me, Burt Wolf, for a taste of the local flavors of San Francisco. San Francisco was founded by 25,000 guys who showed up one afternoon in 1849 to find gold. They were not interested in agriculture or craft work or building a community. They were interested in getting as rich as they could, as fast as they could. And as soon as they got rich, they were interested in partying. Some of those guys got rich from fun. They came back to town to open a restaurant. The French and many other European immigrants influenced the early cooking of San Francisco. But the biggest impact came from the thousands of Chinese laborers who worked in the gold fields and on the railroads and at the wineries. They built their own town within a town. Today it is the largest Chinatown outside Asia. Originally, it was almost completely a male society. The men lived in small rooms without kitchens. All their meals were taken in nearby restaurants, hundreds of restaurants, and at all levels of quality and expense. Today, some of the finest Chinese cooking in the world is right here in San Francisco.
Good morning, America.
Good morning.